This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast, and you're on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim. We are here at WPSL Digital 1590 and WSTU. Please give us a call at 772-340-1590. I'll be glad to take your calls this morning. We are simply a few days before election, as everybody knows. And it's worth noting that the Torah portion for this week, last week it was about language, imagine that. And this, because it was the Tower of Babel among its many other stories. And of course
That's the White House, isn't it?
I'm not touching that one. I'm not touching that. He's having a good time over here. Thank you for that, Greg.
Yeah, well, it's not election day anymore.
It's election month.
It's, I was reading that story. I mean, there are going to be about 12 states that do not have to have their ballots in until almost Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's going to take a little while. We'll see how many points those states actually hold.
That's true. Yeah, but still, I've never heard.
It's the Electoral College. It's not the popular vote.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So once somebody has 270 points, they will declare it.
Bingo.
Yeah,
that's it. Yep.
So, yeah. That's the way it runs, and it's important to vote. I know that there are actually some religions, Jehovah's Witness among them, that don't vote. Right, it's part of their part of their religious belief to stay apolitical, it's certainly an interesting time. We do not discuss candidates unless we've got candidates from both parties present, which we've done in the temple, but we don't. We just don't do a lot of discussing.
Yeah.
But
I get that.
The one thing that I do stress is that it's important to vote. It's important to have a voice in what's going on. It's important to do all of those things.
I think that's it's really interesting. Of course, we're going to have election coverage here, and I've joked on Facebook that once we get the three experts in here, that they're locked in for a month, and nobody's allowed to leave the building till the last vote's counted.
There you go.
But it's what amazes me is the fact that there's whether it's early voting or whatever. I mean, Carol and I went right down to the elections office here on Okeechobee Road, and the process from the time we opened the door to get out in the parking lot to the time we opened the door to get back in was 10 minutes.
Yeah, we voted
easy.
We voted over on Rosser.
Yeah,
and for us, I think Bill said it was 30 minutes. I would have estimated 40. I did not look at my clock, but I'll tell you, I was pleased to see so many people voting.
Yes, yeah, so are we. Yeah,
and I think that's important. I think we really need to have the voice of the country. We need to know what this country is all about. And
when you see the video, especially in Iraq, the purple fingers and stuff of the folks voting, and the fact that they cared so much.
Mm-hmm.
And we take it so much for granted. We really do.
Well, because we've been raised expecting to do it. Expecting it as a right. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I get
So it's part of American privilege, if you will. We don't value it enough.
that. Ooh. Okay, I
Yeah.
never thought of it that way, but yeah.
It is, and so people, when I listen to people's arguments, I have to tell you, so I have two classes that have that do papers on news articles, and on one of the classes does it on politicians. And this year, those have been hard papers to grade. They really have, for a variety of reasons. The politician one, the instructions are pick an active Democrat and an active Republican, analyze one of their speeches or multiple speeches or their platform on their official website, and find 3 fallacies and analyze them for each. And when all is said,
Only 3?
yeah, for both. And when all is said and done, I have to not be able to know if you're a Democrat or a Republican. And I have to tell you, that part this year they have not successfully done. For, I would say, 90% of the papers I could easily tell by the tone of their criticism. And the other part that gets me is the people who don't understand what a fallacy is. And unfortunately, this is in a class where they're supposed to be learning about that. Fallacies are errors of logic. It's where your conclusion does not necessarily follow from your arguments. Okay, so a really crazy example of a fallacy is all humans are mortal. Jim is a cat, therefore Jim is mortal. You can't get there from here, right? You can't get to that conclusion.
But what about Jim's dog?
Yeah. Okay. That's a fallacy. And there's a variety of fallacies. And we certainly see all of the politicians on both sides using fallacies. Advertising, that's another subject that they have to analyze, the class that does fallacies. There's a variety of different fallacies that these groups tend to follow. One is bandwagon stuff. You should do it because everybody does it. That's not a good reason. As your mother said, if everybody jumps off the cliff, should you jump too? Right? Just because everybody does it doesn't make it it doesn't make it reasonable.
Sure. Yeah,
Right?
my mom used to say that all the time.
Yeah.
Sure.
I want to do this because Jimmy's doing it. That's not a good reason. You need to want to do it because it's good for you, because it's going to give you something. It's fun. Whatever the reason are, there has to be benefits to doing it besides the fact that your neighbors are doing it or your best friend's parents are doing it. That's a fallacy. But we use them so casually that most people don't realize that they don't make sense, right? Your mother realizes it when you give that argument to her. She may not know why it doesn't make sense, okay? But that's a bandwagon fallacy, and that's often used. You should do this because everybody else is doing it. It's not a good reason. That's peer pressure, but it's not a good reason. And and some of it, the other one that's just used far, far, far too much this political season are ad hominems, where, and what's an ad hominem? Your mother wears army boots, right? It's a slur on an individual. And unfortunately, we see this modeled with political candidates all the time, some more than others. To me, when I hear somebody doing an ad hominem, when I hear them attacking a person, now, is there a place for that? Yes. As Stewart on Ask a Lawyer would tell you, if you have to question the veracity of a witness, then it's appropriate to question whether or not that's an honest person. But the blatant name-calling means, to me, as a teacher of logic and fallacy, that the person has run out of logical arguments and can't make a good argument for what they want without blasting people.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense, and we do see a lot of that in politics. Unfortunately,
you see a lot of it, and partially because the candidates run out of things to say or arguments. There's a clip that I used to show back in the day when I showed clips in class.
What's a class?
Yeah.
I think I read about that once.
No, actually, IRSC does have face-to-face classes with appropriate protocols, and they've been able to prevent spreads, so it's been really cool.
They've done a good job. They really have.
Yeah.
And it's going to get better. I mean, it's, in the athletic vein, we're going to be tested regularly, and I get that too.
Yeah.
That's just
it's
what
just
it
the
is.
way it's going to be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And, such are the joys, as it were. And I was going to bring you the shield, and I forgot. I apologize. I'll set it out for next week.
I've got one in there. I've got to get our engineer to put it together because I can't figure it out. It's it's way too complicated.
Okay.
For me. I know, you laugh. You're the engineer.
Well, there's two kinds of masks. There are two kinds of shields, rather. The ones that go around your forehead and the ones that clip on into your glasses.
Oh, no. This is like big over the forehead and down. Yeah.
It's got a band on it?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. They're easy to put together.
Okay. Well, we'll figure it out.
We'll get to there. But as I started to say, if somebody resorts to those things, that's bullying, and it means they've run out of arguments. The other comment, and people love to do this one, they say, right? Well, who are they? And document it and verify that somebody actually said what you're saying they said. And, like one of the comments, there was a student who commented about some things that were not fallacies. Now, there's a big difference between fallacy and false. False is false. Fallacy is a logic error. Right? So
I thought they were the same.
They're not the same. And you're right. Students often think that's the case because they're not reading the textbook and they're just answering the question.
Textbook.
Yeah, textbook.
I heard about those.
Yeah, imagine taking the time to actually read it. I'm sorry. And
you would have been so frustrated trying to deal with my classes.
Maybe.
Would have driven you.
There's a couple of really good books out there. I actually post a link to one that's available free called The Book of Bad Arguments, where they do a lot of cute analyzing and showing examples of logic fallacies. And, a popular one that a lot of people use is either a straw man or a black and white or slippery slope. Those are probably the most common, and you can easily find them. A slippery slope, Geico makes fun of that, right?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
They use it for humor. They know it's a fallacy. If you don't have their insurance, you're not going to end up in a ditch beat up. But it's fun. It's cute, and what's humorous sticks in our memory. So that's their reason for doing it. They don't think it's real, but I allow that as an example of a fallacy because it is. That's a slippery slope fallacy. If you do this, then which was used in the marriage thing, right? If you allow two people of the same gender to marry, then marriage will be threatened. No, it's not. Marriage is threatened by the people who ignore it, who don't take their vows seriously.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Who take them frivolously. I'll get the words out yet. I'm a speaker on a radio show. So that's a slippery slope kind of argument, and they're used very often. If you do this, blah, blah. There's also a black and white fallacy, which is, you're either for me or you're against me. That's not necessarily true. right? You might not be for somebody, but you also might not be actively against them. There's multiple possibilities. There is more than vanilla and chocolate to ice cream. Right? It's not one or the other. That might be all you have on your table, but it's not all there is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a black and white fallacy. Bandwagon, we talked about. The straw man is where you represent your opponent's argument by some flimsy version of it. You oversimplify it. And then, of course, there's no meat to it, and you can blow it away. Hence the phrase straw man. It doesn't really stand on its own.
Okay, yeah, I get that.
Okay, so those are kinds of fallacies that politicians and advertisers both. And the part of the reason for that is that advertising is not aimed at getting you to logically make a decision. It's trying to emotionally get you to buy. Right? Because buying decisions are usually emotional. If they weren't, there would not be colors of cars. Because a yellow car or a red car or an orange car don't drive any better than a black one, or a white one, or a this or a that. You might have a color preference if you live in Florida or in Arizona, where you want a light-colored car for heat. But other than that, it doesn't drive any better, it doesn't drive any worse. The color of the paint does not influence the dynamics of the car. Right?
And then you sell televisions to guys. And not the wives.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of the play-by-play action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's a counter piece on it that's kind of interesting, which is somebody not doing their marketing. Now I'm going to flip off and sidetrack on that. When I worked at Goodyear, we had the hardest time trying to convince the sales department to advertise to women, because women make most of the replacement tire decisions.
They do.
In a family. And Goodyear's marketing did not get that. Bridgestone Michelin did a beautiful job.
Yeah.
With the baby and the tires. And, it was like, folks, they got it. They know who's making that decision. It's mom who's got to drive the station wagon or the SUV or the kids around, and she wants tires that are safe. So, hello. But instead, there was this macho thing of we win more races.
Right. Oh, yeah. 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 Whether it was road races or NASCAR, we're the official tire of.
Yeah. That was very, very popular for them. And, and I've got a patent for, of all things, a go-kart tire.
You do?
I do.
Well,
I
go-kart
did.
tire.
I'm sure it's expired by now. Yeah, go-kart
That's
tire.
so cool. Okay.
And they supposedly ran very, very well. I never got to the track to see them, but the report back from the drivers was that my change made a huge difference in the handling of the tire, and they were able to go faster.
Wow. Of course, there's a lot of race car drivers who started in go-karts, too.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's why Goodyear used to be in it, but there's not enough money in it anymore. And, most of the race department actually is a lost advertising expense. Yeah.
We won't even get into your flying vehicle.
Ah, my airplanes?
The blimp.
Oh.
The Goodyear blimp.
Yeah. I'll tell you, as an employee of Goodyear, it was easier for a customer of tires to get a ride in a blimp than an employee. We never did. Neither I nor my husband. My husband worked at Goodyear.
Really? Oh, I've been up in it a few times. Yeah.
Carol, of course you did, because you're media.
Yeah. Carol was in it.
You just about got a cart ticket. Yeah, you guys can get it like... Now I have a better chance of getting it than I ever had. Yeah, they're very much likely to give media or tire dealers who buy the tires from Goodyear and then sell them.
But how does that sell tires? I've never, I know you look up and you see it, and
well, it's name recognition.
I get that,
and that some value. That's an advertising expense. It's just name recognition. You walk into the store and you never heard of Fuji tires or something. You're more likely to buy the name that you know. Same thing in elections, right? It's why politicians advertise. When you walk into the polling booth and you've got this big form with, I don't know, 20, 30 names on it, you're more likely to vote for the candidate whose name you recognize. Then, unfortunately, most voters do not really know the candidates. And they don't, they might know the top one or two that they're interested in. But, there were a whole lot of names on there. And, people aren't even aware of who's running, let alone what they stand for. And so people are much more likely to vote for the politician outside the 150-foot line who shook your hand and said good morning, right? Who gave you their card or their brochure, because it's a name you now recognize and it's in your short-term memory as you walk into the polling station. And I will tell you, when I was 18 and could finally vote, because I'm a baby, and when I walked up to the polling station, that was in Pennsylvania, in Pennsylvania then they had the voting machines where you flip the lever and then you hit the big lever and that tallied your vote. And they had a mock-up outside the polling station. The voting was inside the building, and outside under the overhang was was one of these voting machines. And one of the people running for some little office showed me how to run it, how to actually do my vote, because he saw me coming up and he said, "Is this your first time voting?" Because I looked like I was 13. And actually, that's not true. I was able to get drinks without being carded, so I didn't look quite that young. But depends on how I was dressed. Yeah, it depends on how I was dressed and what I was doing.
There you go.
And he was very, very nice. Showed me how to run the machine. Showed me, said make sure that you double check it. And he really went out of his way. He was just nice. And I don't even remember what party he was from, but I voted for him because he was nice in those couple of minutes. And that's one of the reasons why at the rallies there's this desire for a politician to hand pump. And of course now with COVID that's very difficult. And people are much more likely to vote for the person they see at a rally because they feel they have some connection to that person.
Did you ever go to the polls with your parents as a real little kid? My mom took me.
I'm sure that I did because I can't picture what else. And my parents both took it very seriously. And as I said, I turned 18 and I voted that year. My birthday's in April and I was in the polling station at 18. So, and I did something that was perhaps a little bit interesting. I registered to vote at my college dorm address. Of course, college students can register at their parents' address because they're still considered domiciled at their parents' home. And I said very candidly, I spend 9 months of the year on campus. I care much more about the city councilman and the dog catcher on campus or surrounding the campus than I do my parents who lived, 100 miles away. And, so they and I actually had that discussion. And I said, and I don't feel like traveling 4 hours, 2 hours. I mean, I love to visit you, Mom and Dad, but, to come home for election day is going to be a hardship. If I vote in Collegeville, Pennsylvania, where I was, all I have to do is walk 2 blocks from the dorm. The polling station's right there. I vote and I go back to class. It makes a lot more sense than taking a day off to come home and visit. So,
what about voting on the web? What do you think?
We use it for honor lock. We use it to monitor students and check their identity. It's used for driver's school. You can verify. There's a variety of ways to do it. We all have unique thumbprints. And, at least in Arizona, parents could take their kid into the polling booth with them, and the kid could fill out the document, right? as long as the parent was casting that vote. That's what matters. It's not who fills out the form. The same is true if somebody has a disability. They're blind, or we had that too. We had a station where somebody could sit and somebody could sit with them and help them fill out the form, either because they have sight problems or some whatever. But and in it's worth noting, in Arizona we had touchscreen voting in the polling station. So if you wanted paper, you got a paper ballot. If you wanted to use the machine, then you could go over to the machine, to the monitor. It was a touchscreen monitor, and you could vote on the screen if you wanted to. We had, I think, 2 of them, and I never saw anybody use them. I think everybody just liked the feel of turning in the paper to the machine.
I remember at Loyola University in L.A., we actually had a polling place. Well, obviously our faculty, the priests, lived on campus, so that was their polling place.
Yeah. Polling places, there's a lot of them. Next door to where the synagogue once, the other synagogue in town once was, here at Fort Pierce, is a polling station. The Masonic Lodge that's on Oleander is a polling station. There's polling stations all over. That one I happen to have seen. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like I say, our early voting experience was amazing. Only done it one other time, but I may do that again.
I have voted early all but one election here in Florida. Yeah, since I moved to Florida. I like it because the lines, although I have to say my first election here was the President Obama's second term. And I waited for early voting well over an hour and waved to my neighbors whom I saw in line with me. And we had gone over to Aroso.
Mm-hmm.
And, just picked a time that it was convenient. I think early voting's a great idea. I hope we do more of that. Colorado does mail-in ballots for every...
And they've been doing that for years.
They've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
They've got it down. It's very easy to verify identity. It's not that hard. It's worth, there's another fallacy, right? The tons and tons of fraud. No, there isn't. It's 143 cases in the last 5 years.
Several million ballots. Yeah.
I mean, it's just not a lot, And generally, it's somebody trying to be cute. Right? And I was even thinking about it. Somebody was telling me about they didn't have voter ID with photo ID in New Mexico at the time. I had a friend who lived in Albuquerque, and he said that he was sitting in a polling station, and they had up names of people that they were looking for or something like that for voting, and that there was this couple that was looking up names and came in and voted. And I'm like, well, they can do it maybe once each polling station. How many people can do that? And then the third person who comes in and says, "Hi, I'm John Flugelhorn," is probably going to get turned away.
Yeah. There's a deputy that wants to see you in the back of the room. Yeah.
So there's a limit to how much of that you're going to be able to do.
Right.
It's just like, and I loved it. I very, very thrilled when I saw the amendment that talks about only citizens could vote. That's been the law. That of all the crazy amendments, that's designed to bring a certain element out to the polling in a hope to bring, because it's always been the flap about all of that. So there's lots and lots of stuff out there. There's lots and lots of fodder for me normally those are fun papers to read. It has not been fun to read this year.
Well, what's really interesting is that you hear a lot of, especially out of the Black Lives Matter group, that, showing your ID is voter suppression. Well, it's not. We've had to show ID, whether it's California or here, all the time.
Let me back it up for you a second.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay? And you wouldn't know about it because you're male.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay. Oh, I know where you're going.
Because in Florida, you have to show your birth certificate and you have to document every name change if your name doesn't match your birth certificate name. I'm willing to bet that your name matches your birth certificate name.
Yeah.
And I'll bet that Carol's doesn't.
Correct.
Women tend to vote Democratic.
Oh, jeez. Oh, brother.
Okay, so now you've made it more difficult for a woman to get a photo ID. Oh.
And then bring in divorce.
Yeah, you bring in divorce, and, the tracking of the name becomes much more difficult.
Oh, wow.
All right?
I never even thought of that.
No, because you have, forgive me, Greg, male privilege. Okay? So if you're not subject to, I had to do an interesting little piece. I was moving here, and I saw what the requirements were. And I was like, oh, great. Okay. But one of the things you can use to show that your name legally is, in my case, Lobb and no longer Silver, which is what I was born with. And at some point I did, and I didn't change it over at marriage. I changed it over later. But it's easy for a woman to change her name. You don't have to go to court to do it. And, so I started changing it and went with the new name. But one of the ways that you can show that in Florida that's acceptable is a current and valid passport. Okay. Now, in Arizona, federally, to get your passport, you need a current driver's license in your name.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get your passport renewed. So in Arizona, I took my Arizona license, which had Lobb on it, and got my passport renewed. Then I moved to Florida, and I showed my passport and my Arizona license, and my birth certificate was Silver, and I did not have to document the name change because it was in two current documents.
I don't even know where my birth certificate is.
You're in renewal mode on your driver's license. You might have to show it this time.
Oh, great.
or a passport. That's why I keep my passport current.
The passport, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I keep the passport current. So, because it also has on it my maiden name. But, yeah, so those requirements are harder on women who change their name and go with their husband's name.
Wow.
Yeah. Because women tend to vote Democratic. And so we see those kinds of restrictions put through when Republicans control the state government at times when they've got the upper hand in that state. You'll see those kinds of things going in. So that's the subtlety behind the photo ID. The other group, the non-drivers, have a harder time because they have to go in and get this photo ID. They don't automatically have it. Who tends to not have driver's license? The poor, the inner city, the ones that rely on public transportation or walk where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're not as likely to have it. They're also more likely to vote Democratic.
It's interesting because Carol's mom, who never drove, had what they call an ID card, similar to a driver's license, but
it's a state-issued ID card.
Right.
And Native Americans, American Indians, may not have it like in Arizona. They may have the tribal ID that may not have a photo on it. And if they don't have a driver's license, it's photos on your driver's license. I remember when I'm old enough, back in the dinosaur day, when there were not photos on your driver's license.
Boy, I don't ever remember that.
Yeah.
I think we always had them in California.
Well, California, yes. California is one of the first states to put it in. Pennsylvania didn't have it when I first got my driver's license in I don't remember that South Carolina had it, which is where I got my first driver's license. So, yeah.
I never even thought about the ID thing.
So there's a whole lot more to that issue. So for American Indians, if they have tribal ID and they have, then they needed the supplementary other forms of ID, which were utilities addressed to them at the address. Because you're showing two things with that ID. One is that you're you, and the other part is that you are indeed in this district to vote in it. Right? And so, okay. Lots of different, there's lots of little subtleties in there. And, the reality is that we need everybody in the country who is eligible to vote to be able to vote. And we need to make that not difficult. We need to make it as easy as possible. The goal should be the votes of the most people. And, we see that all over being suppressed at different ways. The one place per county that you could drop off ballots when we've got such a high number of people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and, if you look at counties like in Arizona, if Arizona implemented that, you could have to drive for 2 hours.
Oh, easy.
Because depending on where you are in your county, and what if the place doesn't put it in the middle of the county, but puts it on one far end that's lowly populated. That can be done very unfairly. Florida, not as big a deal. Our counties are smaller. Although, I'd hate to be in Miami-Dade and have one polling station.
Yeah, well, just think if you lived in West Texas and you had to go to Dallas or something. That's a full day's drive.
Well, you drive half of the drive between Tucson and Port St. Lucie was Texas.
Through Texas, yes. That's so true.
It's 880 miles. I'll remember that probably forever. I was so happy when I finally saw that last mile. No offense to Texas, but it's just so bloomin' big. Now, Texas is not, doesn't all look the same. It's many, many different ecosystems and scenery types, but it's still Texas. And you're in it for a good long time.
Oh, yeah.
Especially going across from Tucson, you're going across the widest part of the state. So, yeah. So there's subtle things that don't sound like they're really so bad, but the way they're applied becomes unfair. The gerrymandering of districts, hugely unfair, and that ends up in courts over and over and over again. States are allowed to define their districts, and so you've got people that abuse that and don't. The idea should be you poll people and you make it as easy as possible for people to vote. You try to get a real measure of what the people think. And that's what I'd love to know. I'm not convinced we're going to know that out of this election. I'd like to think we are. We'll see. We'll see where it goes.
It's 2020.
It's 2020.
What can you say?
And then there's all kinds of interesting logic. Like there was one person that was interviewed. They did a thing of having people listen to the last debate. They had, I think it was 11 or 12 people that claimed they were undecided, and that listened to the debate. And then they asked, how many of you decided? And some number of hands went up, and they asked them who they were going to vote for. And then they went to the people there were 4 people who still said they were undecided. They were going to wait. And there was one person that just blew me away, which was the last person they talked to. And they said it was a youngish man. And they asked him, what did he need to see or hear to help him make up his mind? And here was his answer. He said he's going to wait and see if Supreme Court Justice Barrett gets confirmed. And if she does, he's going to vote Biden. But if she doesn't, he's going to vote Trump. And I thought that was kind of an interesting, And they asked him, they said, why? And he said that he thought that Biden was a better leader, had more of the skill set, but he wanted a very conservative judge on the Supreme Court.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you know what? You know, people make their minds up in some of the most interesting ways, and that's the reason for mentioning that. There is not necessarily logic to how people make their decisions. Some of it's advertising, and that's part of the reason. Getting back to where I started, why there are so many fallacies on all sides, and why politicians and advertising use it is because they are appealing to emotion. And they don't always read people well, like Goodyear not reading women as being the shoppers of replacement tires, right? Or the guy when we were a whole lot younger and had more disposable income, when Bill and I impulse bought a Toyota Supra, and that was an impulse. It's the largest impulse purchase I have ever made in my life. That's pretty significant. Because we didn't need another car. A Supra is not a car that you buy if you need a car anyway. It's a car that you buy because you want a Supra.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even remember, I think we went to the car show either because it was in the mall and we were going to go to the mall anyway, or we went to it just to have something to do that.
Because it was there, yeah.
It was there. It was something to do. I don't remember which. But we walked in, and both of us instantly were attracted to the Supra. And the Supra was kind of an orangey, like a burnt orange color. It's just gorgeous. And we're sitting there, you know, when we're obviously a young couple, we were newlyweds, and we're holding hands and all of the other things that newlyweds do. And the salesman's like, oh, you know, you can get a Corolla. It's the same thing. And it's like, dude, we're engineers. We know there's a huge difference between a Corolla and a Supra. Yeah. And he totally didn't get it. We ended up walking out of the car show, and we walked over to the Toyota dealer nearest Goodyear and bought it there.
There you go.
And that salesman could have charged us list price, and they discounted it. We didn't turn down the money.
There you go.
But, you know, that's not reading your customer. And so they've got paradigms, too. They've got things that block the information they're taking in. And same thing happens with candidates. Candidates tend to they want to do what worked or what they think will work. And they're not necessarily willing to try things.
Never pre-qualify a customer.
Right.
I remember we were doing some of our legendary Spanish remotes, and the place is no longer there now. Johnson Chrysler, and Mrs. Johnson was in her 90s when she finally sold the dealership. But this was, it was very intriguing, where Chrysler had this corporate mandate to start marketing to Hispanics. And it has never been a big Hispanic car. Chevy was like, or Ford, but most likely Chevy was the biggie.
Baseball, apple pie.
Yeah, yeah. And all of a sudden, you see these guys, and it was interesting, walking up with torn jeans, you know, sandals, and sacks of money. The Anglo sales guys never even looked at these folks.
Oh, they never even realized.
They're carrying $32,000 for a brand new Chrysler.
Yeah, because they shop cash.
And it was, I was so fascinated just to see the body language of these different salespeople. And it was like, really?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, in the days when we used to sell jewelry, we used to sell jewelry at shows, so we traveled with it. The jewelry was always in a plastic bag inside a paper bag.
Okay.
Because nobody would have thought it was anything.
Yeah. Lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just wrapped up nicely in a Not even particularly neatly. We reused the paper bag until it fell apart. And the other thing about that, you could leave it in the car.
Wow.
Nobody'd break into a car for a paper bag.
Okay. $10 million in jewels in there, but what the heck?
Yeah.
That's funny.
But if I put a safe in there, people would break in.
Sure.
Yeah, because then it looks like it's worth it. So it's always interesting things, right? And somebody here on Facebook, Sharon mentioned, Oregon also mails ballots. There's lots of states now, not lots, but there's a number of states that do mail-in ballots. And my request to people is to vote, getting back to it. And let me also, I have another request. The Sunday after, next Sunday, a week from 2 days from now, at the Port St. Lucie Community Center, the Parks and Rec Community Center on Oroso. Please join us for our inaugural plant sale. We've got a plant sale, and we are going to be masked and social distancing and adhering to the PSL COVID guidelines. 10 people in a room at a time, so you can come in and make your purchases, and we'll work it out. We'll figure out how we're going to do all of that, but we're going to keep it safe. But it's our first plant sale. We've got lots of exciting plants. I know that I've got over 100 little things growing in my porch right now.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was funny. When I first started doing it, Bill said to me, he says, "What's with all the little pots?" I said, "Our pot sale." So, I guess he thought I was going to plant 5 million things in our yard. No, maybe one of each, but not 5 million. And obviously, I'm exaggerating.
If you planted 2, that would be like the Ark. Never mind. I'm sorry.
No, the Ark is more than 2. It's 2 by 2. It's pairs, breeding pairs, but it's 7 of clean animals, 7 pairs of clean animals, and 2 pairs of unclean animals. What's a clean animal? What's an unclean? Clean animals are the ones that are fit to eat, which are split hooves and chew their cud. So that's going to be your cows, your bison, all of the 5 million breeds and varieties and species of gazelle / mountain goat, all of those guys. They're all vegetarians, And if you question how many different kinds of those you'd have needed to have had on the Ark, you can go to the Natural Museum in Arizona and see how many hundreds of species there are. And the unclean animals, that would include your alligators, your lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, and all of their varieties. And you need 4 of those. And here's the real rub on that. You need food for a year because they float for a year. It's not, they're on there for 40 days before it even lifts off, because it has to rain for 40 days and 40 nights before the Ark is even afloat, and then it floats for a year until the dove goes out and finds and brings back the sprig.
See, if you were to do that now, you could just use a Carnival cruise ship because they're not being used.
That's a little bit bigger than an Ark.
A little bit bigger, yeah.
Right, and you've got a crew of 8 dealing with this. It's a sacred story. It's a wonderful sacred story. We can talk about why it's an interesting story someday when we have more than 4 minutes left on the show. But that was last week. This week, the instruction is to Abram, not Abraham. He's not yet Abraham. He'll become Abraham later. But the instruction is to him to go for yourself. Leave the land of your birth and the house of your father, and go do it on your own. Go be your own person, and you will be great.
Cool message.
Yeah, it's a cool message. Lech lecha, or lechi lach in. Go for yourself. Go be something significant, and it's the beginning of the story of Abram and Sarai. She's not born Sarah. She changes her name too. But she probably didn't have to worry about photo ID.
Yeah, you need ID to drive chariots. No, I'm sorry. That's terrible.
Well, God doesn't issue legal documents when your name changes. Right?
So, when did Abram's name change to Abraham?
Shortly before Isaac is born. It happens along the way. God says, your name is no longer Abram, it's now Abraham. And Sarai's name is no longer Sarai, it's Sarah. So it changes from spoiled princess to matriarch.
Oh, boy. Oh, oh, what a look on your face.
And from mighty father to the father of many. So, it's important. Puts an H, a hey in both of their names. Hey is the symbol of the hand.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, lots of little things. Anyway.
Get out to vote.
Yeah, get out to vote. Put your hand up, be counted. That's another piece of liturgy. Baruch Shamar, Brucha Shamra. Blessed are we who speak and are heard. Because that's a two-part thing. It's not just yelling and screaming to be louder than anybody else, but it's about talking in a way that people want to hear what you have to say. Right? Because listening is not just hearing, it's wanting to hear. There's a difference between hearing. If somebody screams in your ear, you might hear them, but you might not listen.
Sure.
Listening is wanting to hear, and communication happens best when the person sending out the message wants to be heard and the person receiving wants to hear. That's when you have communication. And, that's part of why sales, we're going to come back around to the beginning. That's why sales folks and politicians try to reach emotions, and sometimes, yes, they totally misfire. So be safe, be careful. Come to our plant sale November 8th from 2 to 5 at the Port St. Lucie Ports and Rec Community Center on Oroso. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb for Congregation Eitz Chayim, and this has been Ask a Rabbi. I can almost speak this radio person. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a good week. You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie, talking the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world.